Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we have another special guest with us, Miss Marjory Wildcraft, who is going to be bringing a much needed discussion piece. This is part of the wealth transfer is your health and your wealth. And what is the best way to maintain your health? Your diet. And how do you do that? Well, growing your own food, as we talked about, one of the key things when owning land and having land resources would constitute this part of it. And Marjory is here to help us navigate how to do just that. So she's going to be talking about how to grow your own food, protect your family, get off the grid, the grocery store's beast system, and the concerns she has, and how we can be proactive in making that transition. If you're new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and hit that share button so that others can gain in the knowledge you're currently being afforded. As we always do, as you know, customarily with new guests, we read their bio verbatim, so I will do that thusly. When the world goes crazy, you're going to wish Marjory was your neighbor. Marjory Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. She is the global advocate for, quote, homegrown food on every table, end quote. In 2009, she founded the Grow Network, which is the web's best resource for modern self sufficiency. She's been featured by National Geographic as an expert of off grid living. She has hosted the Mother Earth News Online Homesteading Summit, and she is listed in the Who's Who's America for having inspired hundreds of thousands of backyard miniature farms. Marjory's work won Reuters Food Sustainability Media Award, and she recently authored the prepping bestseller book, The Growth System, the essential guide to modern self-sufficient living, from growing food to making medicine. Via her videos, books, and thousands of interviews on radio and television, Marjory has helped millions of people grow food right in their own backyards. You can catch her on her viral webinar, How to Grow Lots of Food in Your Backyard, even if you have no experience or are older, out of shape, etc., which we will include the link in the description, www.backyardfoodproduction.com. She's also the female leader of the survival preparedness movement, again, and she also has additional books, The Essential Guide to Modern Sufficient Living, Growing Food, etc. And I am pleased and honored to introduce the one and only Miss Marjory Wildcraft. Marjory, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm a little bit flustered. I think everybody at this point in time is in some kind of crazy vortex of change. And for me, I
Mm,
just moved household. So, yeah, my background here is a little unsettled, but that's my
that's
bookshelf
okay.
in process. Yeah, but I mean, we're in it, folks. We're in it. And you really have to up your degree of self-reliance. And hopefully I can help you do that. I've been working on this. I'm more of the home front, like during a wartime, what are the home front skills? So I grew up in the South, was always interested in my coach while in doing sports, I was always interested in Civil War stuff. We go visit, this battlefield and that battlefield, and I always said, what do the women and children do? You know,
Mm.
and that's actually what I've ended up figuring out and teaching people is, how do you take care of your family? How do you grow food? How do you make medicine? How do you make do with a whole lot less under extreme situations? And we are in it. We're in it, and it's going to get more and more interesting as we go along.
Very much so. And you were sort of one of the topics of interest I wanted to cover for a while. We, as you know, we're a faith-based channel focused primarily on God's giving people's wealth transfer financially. But again, how do you do that if your health and your food supply is, you can have all the money in the world, but if you can't get access to food, it's meaningless. So you were sort of one of the proverbial holes we wanted to fill for some time. So thank you for being here. Let's start at the top, Marjory. How did it all start? How did you get into backyard food production?
Well, if you looked at my background, you would never imagine it. My first degree is in electrical engineering. And I had always wanted to travel internationally. I scored an expat position with Motorola. I was living in Hong Kong. I was a section manager of engineering there on a mobile phone network, and always interested in money because my family was. I mean, being poor in America really isn't that much of a hardship, but we were definitely poor. Um, and so kids that grow up in those kind of families often are real interested in wealth. And and somebody said that my friends, Hong Kong is very capitalistic, or it used to be, and they say you got to take this workshop with this guy named Robert, and I'm like, okay, do we know him? And they're like, no, we know nothing about him, but he's really good. So I took the workshop, and Robert ultimately inspired me to leave engineering and create my own real estate investment business. I did that in Austin, Texas, and it was so successful. actually, I made my first million before I was 40, that Robert came back to me and said, would you be on my infomercials? And so for 4 years, I was on different infomercials for Robert Kiyosaki, selling Rich Dad, Poor Dad products. As his systems worked, I mean, the guy was like,
Sure.
I mean, now a lot of his stuff is like everyday knowledge, but back then it was mind blowing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was living the game, being in the matrix, that was what I was succeeding in life, right? Everything we thought. And one day I was volunteering on a project, and this was so innocent. I had no idea it was going to be like the Mack truck or the stage 4 cancer diagnosis or your life is going to change dramatically experience. And what we were trying to do was get locally grown food into an elementary school that was, in a neighboring county, just a small rural elementary school. And the president of the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, Steve Bridges, was a good friend of mine. And I said, I'll absolutely help on this project. And the whole thing was a complete and utter failure. I will never remember that night. I'll never forget that night when, and I had organized, we were at the Red Rock Community Center. And we realized that there were not enough local organic farmers to provide even part of the vegetables for that one small rural elementary school. And I couldn't stop shaking. The whole meeting just sort of dissolving. For hours, I was shaking because I knew there was only 4 days worth of food in the grocery stores. There are no big warehouses of food. The average delivery is 1,500 miles. And if anything ever happened to the just-in-time trucking system. And I was surrounded by 20 million Texans who are armed to the teeth. I later became armed to the teeth too, but at that point in time, I wasn't. And, I just said, wow, this was, we all want instructions from God. Like, how do we need to live our lives? And it came to me, man, he downloaded, like, I really could not physically stop shaking for hours. And for years after that, I'd have panic attacks and night sweats. And I knew that I ended up selling the real estate business, and I knew that I had to dedicate my life to backyard food production, which sounds so insane. I was used to signing $1 million checks, and now I'm like backyard food production. And all the family, this is like back in the early 2000s, all the family said, you're nuts. Like, we're never going to have a problem in the U.S. There's never going to be supply chain problems. There's never going to be empty shelves, like all that. Right. And then when, 2010 came along, and then eventually 2020, a lot of people started going, oh my God, maybe she's on to something. But yeah, so all these years I've realized people aren't going to get into this until we're into crisis. So I've grown food every way you can grow it. I've wildcrafted, I've foraged, I've spent time in the national forest with the barefoot crazies, you know, and I really knew I had to dedicate my life to teaching people and coming up with the fastest and easiest ways for people who have no experience. They're older, they're out of shape, and how do you get them up to speed very, very quickly? So I didn't get into it from like, oh, that'd be nice. I got into it being freaked out of my mind.
Hmm. Well, it's fascinating, Marjory. Wow, thank you for that, because you and I hadn't really, we talked a little bit offline, obviously prepped, but I like this, no pun intended, to be organic. It's a much more fluid conversation when it's just more extemporaneous like this. And so there was no way for me to know the extent of your financial background, but it's so apropos how it all comes together. And you got out at the right time, ironically, with real estate because of what happened in 2007, 08, right?
Yep.
What's about to
Yep.
happen again with that. So,
Yep. It absolutely is about to happen.
and
Actually, all
yeah,
of my
go ahead.
investors came back and thanked me. At first, they were like, no, we're making so much money. And I said, no, we got to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a blessing in many, when you listen,
Yeah.
and follow instructions, it's a blessing.
Who knew? God knows what
Yeah.
he was talking about. And the fact that you were obedient to it, you knew when to get in, when to get out, and you were seeking him. And so he provided like he always does. And think of the legacy just on that level of what you're doing now, what you've already done, what you're about to achieve in this greatest wealth transfer for, because we're going to be having a lot of people on these channels being able to buy land and actually have a way to, harvest it and get the best out of it that will, help their families, help their communities. It will be this gigantic ripple effect, which I would imagine had to be part and parcel of what you had in mind in doing this, because you strike me as somebody who's more of a selfless giver. You otherwise, why do it other than, you could just kept it to yourself, but you wanted it to grow beyond the scope of your backyard, so to speak. So taking that going forward, Marjory, what can people realistically grow in a backyard, and how much time does it typically take to do that?
Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, if I start growing food, I'm going to turn into a migrant worker. And I'm going to tell you that it's not, nothing could be further from the truth. Really, in a backyard, like I can show you in 3 parking spaces, so that small of a backyard, how to produce at least half of your own food. And it'll really only take you, about a half an hour a day. And the systems are set up to totally maximize the amount of calories and nutrition. Like malnutrition, like America is more malnutrition than like Africa, right? We don't normally think about it because it looks like we have a lot of food. Those are all empty calories. That's why people are so large right now. So yeah, and it's set up in like on those mornings when you got a flat tire and you got to go to the dentist and the kids are screaming, you can just like put some feed here, put some feed there, check some water and go. Like you can be done in 5 minutes. And then sometimes, on a weekend with the kids, you're going to want to turn over the garden or change out the chicken coop or do something. That'll be a couple of hours. But on average, it's less than a half an hour a day for half of your own food. And half is huge. Your health will completely turn around
Mm.
growing half of your own food.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And one of the thoughts I have, and I talked to you offline, I personally want to consult with you when I move myself because I want to get like a 2,000 square foot greenhouse and grow all my
Nice.
favorite fruits and vegetables and flowers for whoever my future wife ends up being, like just on a thoughtful approach, and
Yeah.
having that just sustain itself, over and over in a controlled environment. So you'll be instrumental in helping with that. We had a guest on not too long ago, a friend of ours, Dave Champion, who's a brilliant man in his own right, and he wrote a book about body science. And
Mm-hmm.
he's more into the paleo, mostly
Mm-hmm.
eating meat and animal products, but also somewhat a little bit on the plant-based side. So on that point. But what I was getting at is that his contention, and one of the things in the book is that 70% of the grocery stores, what's in there, you talk about empty calories, don't need to really exist. And only about 30% of the grocery store is really worthy or worthwhile of being accessible. And you could have much more of a smaller footprint if you just had that. How much food do we actually have in storage, if for grocery stores? And how much of a footprint do we actually need in grocery stores when we start growing our own food?
Well, when you start, it's like any skill, and you're gonna, it's a gradual process. Like, so the first thing I really recommend people is get a small backyard flock of laying hens, right? Like 6 is great. You'll get, approximately 1,500 eggs a year, which is about 3 egg omelets every morning for breakfast, and then 33 dozen to trade or give away. And then you'll notice yourself going by the egg section of the grocery store, going, right? You don't need that. And then
Right.
you'll start doing more things, raising this or raising that, and more you'll be able to completely disentangle from the grocery store. My contention, the only thing I go to the grocery store for now is paper towels, right? I know people are doing their best and they're trying hard with organic. The organic thing has been completely usurped by the USDA. Like they just approved Bill Gates' appeal coding as an organic standard thing, which nothing could be further from the truth. There's all kinds of stuff. It started legitimately as an honest movement and it got taken over by big business. So really, I don't think there's anything in the grocery store that's worth eating. And, I really do believe, the wonderful saving grace in this is that you can work directly with the earth and your hands with water and soil and sunlight and God, and you can work directly with the forces of creation and create what you need. So it's a little process to get going. And again, I've really laid it out very, very simply for people in beginners in that free webinar. So um, you can do it. And that's what the saving grace is you don't need a governmental, industrial, military complex to feed you. You
Right.
can do it on your own.
And you can and you need to do it for where we're headed because it's really going to be about self sufficiency. So the more people get used to that notion and implement it, the better off everyone will be, like you said.
You
Now,
know,
go
even
ahead.
the United Nations, which is not prone to clickbait kind of headlines, and of course, we know that the United Nations is part of the problems we're seeing now, but even they are saying there is a famine of biblical proportions coming. And and again, the good news is you can absolutely circumnavigate that and avoid
Mhm.
it. But it does take a little bit of a lifestyle change, and it's going to be a lifestyle change that you'll actually really love. I mean, I never thought I would like it so much, but I really love it.
No, absolutely. All we have to do is look to the Amish and how
Yeah.
wildly successful they've been over centuries. They didn't have to deal with COVID. They can their own food. It can last, I think, hundreds of years. I mean, they've really got the blueprint in many ways on that. So, no, you're absolutely right about that. Now, you brought this question up, which I'm glad you did because I get this quite a bit. Now, as a kid, I always it was a generational thing that my mom passed down to me and my grandmother before of, she grew up during the depression. She was uh, let's see, she was in her 30s 40s during World War II. And I said to my grandmother, how did you make it during those tough times? She said, we just bartered. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I grew tomatoes and potatoes, and my neighbor Irene, who I got to know as a little kid, she grew corn and green beans, and we just traded off, and everybody lived and
Yeah.
ate well, and pre-organic, pre-GMO, all that kind of stuff. So there's been somewhat of a green thumb in my family, but not everybody has that. A lot of people kind of jocularly say they have a brown thumb and they can't even grow dirt. So what is the secret in your estimation to having a green thumb?
Yeah, and I love that. My mom got started late, so my mom and my dad both lived through the Great Depression. They were very much older parents, and I've been very interested in that time frame specifically. So the secret to a green thumb is good soil. And now normally you're thinking, don't get that in my living room. It's dirt, right? We know it's dirt, cheaper than dirt, right? Where you get all your gun parts from. Normally we just don't want anything to do with it, but honestly, good, rich, fertile soil that's full of biological activity is the secret to a green thumb. So when you're setting up your gardens, um, and I really recommend doing a raised bed garden with like 2 cinder blocks high, partly because you can sit on those cinder blocks. That way you don't, if you have a bad back or other issues, you can still do this. But buy the best quality soil that you can find or afford to fill that garden up with, because uh, it's very simple. When plants have all the nutrition they need, they're strong and healthy, and they do resist insects. You're going to always have some, but it's not going to be like when I first started growing, I didn't know this, and we had bought a place that was just sand, and I planted the broccoli, and the broccoli just died because there's no nutrition in the sand, right? And then later on, when I really had really good soil, of course, the broccoli is like, yay, I love life. So really good soil is the secret to a green thumb.
Interesting. Thank you for that. No, that makes a lot of sense. And just piggybacking a second ago on what you were talking about with the useless nations actually letting out a little bit of their truth out of the bag about the famine coming. I'd often said to some of the men in my church and our Bible leadership group that in the days of Joseph, you had 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But that food is going to be the new currency, and I think in many ways it will be. So please.
Yes, you and me both. I like to tell people that, I talk in my webinar about here's how many calories this produces, and I've had some blowback from that. People are going, calories? I don't want calories, and I'm like, yes, you do. Calorie is going to be the new unit of currency. You know,
Yeah.
and there's a difference between a quality calorie that's deeply nutritious and alive and vibrant and beneficial to your health, and then Doritos, right? They're
Right.
not the same.
No, no, it's apples and oranges, literally and figuratively. And this is a question I had before the ones that you gave me so thoughtfully. Is before we go forward on, what foods to have and which produce the most yield and all that. How do you go about? You talked about the soil. The seed itself is obviously equally important. How do we get non-GMO seeds? How do we verify they're non-GMO? How do you get access to them to get the best quality food in terms of that, in addition to the yield itself?
Yeah, and that's very good to bring up, because actually Monsanto, who is now Bayer, has been buying up a whole bunch of small seed companies. And then also it's time to do this right now, because if you remember in 2020, which was the last thing, like it was almost impossible to buy seeds. I use a company called Texas Ready. They're over at texasready.net. Lucinda Bailey and her husband Kurt. They're just really good, solid Christians. Their seed kits have a lot of seeds in them. They're very careful to be non-GMO. They're open pollinated, which means that you can harvest the seed from it and perpetuate it year after year. They
Hmm.
often in their kits include a book called Seed to Seed, which will teach you how to do it. And if you put the code GROW in there, GROW, then they'll throw in a $25 soil nutrient pack. So texasready.net with coupon code GROW. And just really, really, I've known Lucinda for more than a decade. We've been at a lot of prepper festivals together. I do interviews with her, just super, super knowledgeable, and I really recommend them. There are other good seed companies out there, although they are diminishing, but they give you a packet and then there's like hardly anything in it, you know. Lucinda and Kurt give you a lot of seed in your seed packets, so I really like the value for money. And God knows everybody now is really trying to figure out how to most wisely use what dollars they have
Hmm.
as we enter into this dollar transition. So, but I really recommend texasready.net.
Yeah, somebody that you can speak to personally that you can vouch
Yeah.
for. So that's
Oh,
because
and they're more than happy. You can talk to them on the phone, and they're really, really good people.
great. Thank you for that. That's going to be invaluable to a lot of people, all of us. So thank you again. So I guess now that we've established the seed portion, now let's talk about the yield. What products, in your experience, yield the most food in the least amount of time and space for people who don't have land?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people think of Marjory Wildcraft and they think of gardens and vegetables, and actually, the easiest foods to produce are animal products. And I recommend people get started with a small flock of laying hens, like 6 hens. So, and here's why. So, you can build a chicken coop and a run, and in that free webinar, I show you what one looks like, and there's some plans in there. You do that in a couple of weekends, and if you're not handy carpentry wise, you can get somebody to build it. I mean, there's that barter and trade thing, but you can get that up and running in just a couple of weekends. Go out onto Craigslist or your local feed store and buy 6 laying hens. They're about 6 months old when they start to lay. Get them settled in there. It's going to take a couple of days, and then they will start producing about 5 or 6 eggs a day for you. And eggs are, do not believe that whole cholesterol myth thing that came out in the
Hmm.
60s and 70s. Eggs are a perfect whole food. They're useful in, raw, cooked, deviled, scrambled. I mean, eggs are they're a base ingredient. And you can have this up and running in just a couple of weeks. And just to talk about the calories for a minute, an average egg, which is one of the few things I've ever gotten out of the US government that's useful. The USDA says that an average medium sized egg is about 62 calories. The laying hens produce about 250 eggs a year, so 6 of them, that'll be 1,500 eggs in a year. And that ends up being something like 92,000 calories, which is a significant amount of food right out of the get go that you'll basically have breakfast handled for the rest of your life
Mm.
in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Now, the next portion might be a little bit challenging for people, but I really recommend a small home backyard rabbitry with 1 buck and 3 breeding does. And they breed like rabbits. You're going to get a lot of rabbit meat. You can use your rabbit meat just like chicken in any one of your chicken recipes. In fact, I've often served rabbit to people, forgot to tell them, they just assumed it was chicken. So very, very, healthy meat, easy to produce. The other really great thing about rabbits, because you also really need to think about how you're going to feed your livestock, because I promise you when the grocery stores close, the feed stores are going to close. By the way, when you do sign up for the webinar, we put you on an email sequence, and I give you a free how to grow 100%, how to get 100% of your chicken feed for free, and then how to get 100% of your rabbits food for free. Um, Rabbits are a lot easier to feed because they just eat stuff that you and I don't eat, like grasses and bushes and yardscape trimmings and things like that. So you can get the feed for your animals eventually. When you're first starting out, don't do that. Step one, buy the feed, because you got a lot to figure out and a lot to learn. You got to build that coop,
Mm.
get them going, get new habits, got to build a new lifestyle. But phase two, absolutely, you want to be able to produce all the feed for those animals. And to go back to the rabbits, you know, $3 in a breeding doe, easily, 75, 85 rabbits a year from that system. And that's basically going to be like a rabbit and a half a week. which is like having a chicken and a half a week. It turns out to be the protein requirements for a family of four.
Hmm.
So, and it's honestly, the rabbits and the chickens are easier than the garden. And again, I recommend a 100 square foot garden. You want to have all of them. You want to have diversity in your food production, partly because you want to eat different things, but also because, you just don't know what's going to happen here, there, or anywhere. And again, each of these components, like the rabbitry, the chickens, and the gardens, they all can each fit individually into one parking spot. So takes up about 3 parking spots is the minimum amount of space that you need to operate this whole system. So, meat products by and large are going to be, and oh, by the way, I think it's 75 rabbits a year. That'll get you close to 235,000 calories in a year.
Hmm.
So we're talking about some really good food, good quality food,
And sustainable.
and sustainable
Yeah.
and
Now,
clean. You don't have
clean.
to worry about hormones or antibiotics, or they're vaccinating chickens and beef and pigs, and because there are no regulations for vaccines, they don't have to label it.
Hmm.
So they're putting those mRNA vaccines into the meat supply in the United States without you knowing about it. So you've really got to get off that grocery store.
I've heard that, Marjorie. And so what I started doing was researching long before we met ways to counteract that. So I have an app called Food Checker, which you can get on any iPhone or Android, and you can scan barcode and it tells you, where it derived from, insects, if there's any, bug particulates in there, things to avoid. It gives you a scale of quality of food or not, what they recommend, don't recommend. So that helps at least,
That will help. I'm going to grab that app and play with it. Thank you. See, thanks for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Food
It's
source.
just,
Yeah.
it's food.
Ultimately, really, you really need to be growing your own. It
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. Before we go forward, just to mop up on what you were sharing. So what about people who are, again, who don't have land yet, who live in apartments and are space challenged? What do you recommend for them, foods to grow, things like that?
Yep, you can absolutely get started. So first of all, some herbs in a windowsill. I can't tell you how many members of the Grow Network just started with some herbs in a windowsill. And let me give you a couple of quick pointers so that you'll have success with that.
Please.
First of all, mint, basil, chives, rosemary. These plants are pretty bulletproof, like they're really hardy plants. The other is get as big a pot as you possibly can fit on that windowsill, because the more soil you have in the pot, the more forgiving it's going to be of your erratic watering schedule. You got to
Good
build that
point.
habit of looking at them or talking to them every day. The other thing is, if you've got a windowsill in front of this kitchen sink or somewhere in the kitchen or in the living room, that's ideal. If you put those plants in the spare bedroom, they are going to die. So you've got to have them somewhere where you're seeing them all the time. And everything you learn, don't underestimate, everything you learn from those 4 plants in a windowsill is directly translatable to when you have a garden bed outside. So if it's not
Mm.
getting enough sunlight, they get tall and spindly. If they don't have enough water, they start turning yellow and then brown. Uh, you know, everything that those plants will behave exactly the same in those pots as they do out in the garden. So you'll be learning right away. Let's see, so the herbs in the windowsill. The other thing, and this might be a little bit out there for some people, but I have a girlfriend who's in a condo and she can't, she's negotiating, trying to find the place. And I set her up with a quail cage. This thing is about 3 feet wide and about 6.5 feet tall. And she's got 3 layers of quail in there. She's got 10 different quail, and she's getting about 10 quail eggs a day. And, quail eggs are a little bit smaller.
Mhm.
10 quail eggs a day is equivalent to 3 or 4 chicken eggs. Um, and they're not, I'm not going to say they're not songbirds, but they're not unpleasant and they're fairly quiet. And she's got them in her apartment. You keep up with the cleaning, and it's not, a terrible odor. And she's producing eggs in her apartment. So there's lots and lots of other things to do. I've got a friend who lives in Colorado with a big sunny sliding glass door facing the south. And in the wintertime, she's always got this big trellis with cucumbers going up that thing, or tomatoes. So, she's always year round in vegetables. So there is a lot you can do.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for that. So I'm going to show you real quick, just for your reference point. There's this one app here. I don't think you can see. It's called Yuka, Yuka. And so
Okay.
if you're going to the grocery store, for example, not you, but somebody like Trader Joe's, and it has a list of all the foods, so you can go down there and scan them and see what they disclose, nutritional value. And then the other one here is the one I was referring to, Food Checker. Oops, let me continue here. Food Checker, so you can see, and
Wow.
you can go down the itemized list. You can just scan it, and you can see if there's any, bug particulates or insects or any of that kind of stuff that sometimes they don't have to label. It will decode that. So just a little hack around. It helps people, help you, hopefully some of your constituents, your audience. So thank you again, Marjorie, for that. So um, this may seem like an obvious question, but I think it's a good one. More of an open-ended question. How has growing food changed your life wholesale?
Oh, it's been the most wonderful thing. I know a lot of us are reluctant to do this, and I will tell you right now that's because of the programming.
Mm.
You know how they use music and movies and
Hmm.
everything like that to keep us, and the educational system, everything is designed to keep you stupid and disconnected. And if you think back on every movie or sitcom you've ever seen, the farmer is always portrayed as an idiot. Green Acres,
Right.
almost anything. The farmer's a dumb, whatever,
Sure.
right? There has been programming to keep you from growing your own food because they don't want you to be independent. They don't want you to be strong. They don't want you to be healthy. So, first of all, recognize that if you have some reluctance, it's because that has been intentionally placed into your psyche, and you
Mm.
you can overcome it just like you've overcome everything else. Um, for me personally, it has been the best thing I've ever done. I mean, before growing food, I had horrible allergies, low energy, but growing my own food, and that's all gone. That's so far back. It's like I don't even remember that anymore.
Yeah.
But it's healed me on every single level, on the physical level, again, with all the health things, on the emotional levels. I was not at all concerned during the 2020s when they were locking down, or you had to wait 2 hours to get into I mean, the grocery store's closing does not freak me out. The supply train not working does not freak me out.
Right.
So on the emotional, on the intellectual level, there are reams and reams of studies that show, they did a lot of these with children, but it's also applicable to adults, that when you eat higher quality food, they score higher on intelligence tests. I mean, and it makes sense. If you're eating
Nice.
clean, pure food, you're able to think clearly.
Yeah.
It's just a fact that people who eat better quality food are more intelligent. And then
Well,
spiritually,
yeah.
again, you're working directly with your hands and the forces of creation, and you're working to help create tomatoes and meat and eggs, and I'm going to tell you, I wish we could do a whole show on this, but magic starts to happen. I mean, really, as you start to get directly connected like that, incredible things will start to happen. So on every level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you will be healed, and it's so simple. I mean, it's backyard food production, right? Like, who'd have
True.
thought? So even if we weren't into World War III and this whole collapse and having all the evil whatever running the planet, I would still be growing my own food because it's just the most enjoyable part of my day, and it has so many benefits.
You're so right. I mean, again, going back to my family, it was a sense of camaraderie to grow with my grandmother and my mom, and you had three generations. And when I have my guardians slash kids, I'll perpetuate that legacy going forward, teach them what I was taught and my mom, et cetera, and carrying it forward. So, and you're getting connected with God and grounding and all the
Sunlight,
existential
fresh air.
sunlight, fresh air,
Yeah.
water, all the existential benefits on top of the core benefit, as you said, not just the end result, but the things that lead up to it, right? So, no, I can attest to that. And that's why I'm excited about this discussion and about our audience gaining from it. And again, as I said before, consulting with you upon my move. Another sort of subject I wanted to talk to you about, Marjorie, that ties in with this somewhat indirectly, but I think it's powerful. We're going in a new season. We talked about with the wealth transfer, and food is part of that,
Yeah.
obviously. There's all of these different technologies and patents that have been suppressed from us for probably over a century at least.
Yeah.
We know about med beds, we know about all that, but then I have been reading about One of my mentors told me about a product that they're using, and I think it's in Ecuador, one of the South American countries. It's a way to remove pesticides without the chemicals on the plants, and it's a frequency that you can put in the soil. Do you work with frequencies currently? And as a professional musician, frequencies have been part of my diet for a long time. What importance do you place on frequencies in healthy food growth production for the soil?
I've seen a lot of that coming up, and I have not yet had a chance to experiment it with, but I agree with you with new technologies. I've gone in a slightly different way where I found some guys who have a combination of minerals and microbes. And it's a very, very simple thing that you apply to the soil. There's a huge problem in the cities in the United States when you go to the bathroom that shit basically they separate the solids and the liquid, and then they lightly compost the solids. They turn around and resell it to you. They bag it literally 2-inch, 3-inch high letters, organic soil. Nothing could be further from the truth. We call it biosludge. It's loaded with everything that people throw down the toilet, but including forever chemicals, heavy metals,
Wow.
pharmaceuticals, everything like
Mm.
literally, and they sell it by the truckload to farmers. And I know personally of many farmers who are saying they're organic farmers, but I've been there to help them with the bean harvest or whatever. And I've seen them using this biosludge on the fields, and they honestly believe it's organic because they've been told it's organic. And and then of course we have the whole chemtrails and the spraying, and everybody for years asked me, what can I do? And I didn't have a good answer, but then I ran into a couple of guys, and at this is a time in to be open-minded, right? Open-minded skepticism and test. And they claim to have these minerals and microbes that would remove forever chemicals. It would do something to remediate the heavy metals. It would take apart glyphosate. It would disassemble a lot of this stuff. And I said, first I said, yeah, right, blow me some smoke, right? But we were on a project together, and I kept running back into them. And finally I said, well, okay, I'll just build a couple of test beds and try it out. And I'll be doggone. And we sent them to certified labs, PACE Laboratories, Space Analytical Labs, which is the biggest, lab in the United States. And we have demonstrated forever chemical destruction. There's actually 4 microbes that are known to destroy glyphosate, and they have 2 of the microbes in this product. We're doing heavy metals testing. I mean, this stuff will totally clean up your soils. And the more that I've been using it, here's one wonderful thing. So I've got ducks, and I've got a really small yard right now. I'm leasing. And when you have you're concentrating, you can use ducks like you do chickens. So I have ducks instead of chickens. And whenever you have animals concentrated into a small spot, that spot is going to start smelling terrible because they
Advocate.
shit, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But I've been spraying their area down with these minerals and microbes, and there is no odor whatsoever, none whatsoever, because those microbes get right in there and they turn that feces into good, healthy soil and compost. And like that area is just incredibly vibrant. So I haven't done the sound frequency, and I'm
Hmm.
really intrigued by that. And I absolutely get it. I've had a knee injury, and I've been using sound treatment on that.
Hmm.
But we've gone the routes of the minerals and microbes, and I am so excited. You're right. We have been so suppressed for so many decades with, somebody who had a good invention suddenly either had a lot of money and stopped or died.
Disappeared. Yeah, or
Right?
disappeared. Yeah, yeah, and it's great what you're saying, Marjorie, because it's like you're reverse engineering or hacking their agenda. God always makes a failsafe around the enemy's plans, right? And before I get to my last question, to respect your time, just going back a second, because I don't think we should gloss over this point, Marjorie, as I'm sure you would agree. You're talking about better quality food produces better quality mindset, helps the pineal gland,
Yep.
production of critical thinking, removing fluoride, the water, all those different implications. People have always equated in school, particularly in high school, SATs as the ultimate end all be all, but that's really not the full measure of intelligence because it leaves out a lot of other things: gut quotient, heart quotient, mind quotient. It only measures one metric. And if you have many of the kids who were, most of us were, vaccinated against our will at birth, we still don't know the long-term repercussions. We're finding out with RFK, autism. We already know about COVID, and but there's a host of other poisons that they inculcated us, inoculated us with, that we don't know what those repercussions were as we grew up and forming critical thinking, and and male production, the mind does not completely get completed until 25, your full maturity process for women younger. But, the implications on that and being able to, break that cycle going forward for current and future generations as it relates to the, clean food production, I think is pretty important. So just wanted to add that as a keynote point. The last question, as I mentioned, is where can people go to learn about how to become free of the supermarkets and grow their own food?
Yeah. So thank you, John. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. We're in crisis, and I was called to do this work. I mean, I gave up money and power to do this work, and it's actually been the most rewarding thing I've done with my life. And I've realized I've been trying for 20 years to get people to grow their own food, and I've realized people only come to it with crisis. So I said, okay, God, how do I figure out what's a way that somebody who's in crisis can start producing food very, very quickly? Your average American who doesn't know anything, maybe they're older, maybe they're out of shape. I mean, that's most of America. How do we get them producing up very quickly? And it used to be a longer webinar. I've cut it down to 45 minutes because nobody has much time now. And I go through that very simple 3-part system. It's at backyardfoodproduction.com. And I show you very quickly how to grow a bunch of food in your backyard. And you'll walk away from that webinar knowing that you can produce half of your own food. You'll have a plan for how to get started regardless of where you live. I've lived in and grown food in many, many different climates. And regardless of the season, no matter what time of year it is, there's always something that you can do to get started, and you will have a plan to to roll out all 3. And then once you've done those first 3 where you're producing half of your own food, there's so many other ways to produce food that are so wonderful. But I have totally, from 20 years of looking at this, I have cherry picked the fastest, the easiest, and the funnest ways to produce food for the average person who knows nothing, they're older, and they're out of shape. And that's available at backyardfoodproduction.com.
Absolutely. And we're going to leave those links in the description along with the texasready.net for the seeds, because I think that's equally compelling and important, particularly since you put so much stock and trade in them. I do have to ask one more quick question. I apologize.
Sure, don't apologize. Yeah.
Well, no, because I want to respect your time, but I think this is noteworthy. You and I talked about this in our initial meet and greet to prep for the podcast. You and I had a sort of a back and forth discussion because we are in the biblical times. We are entering the golden age, but also the end times with it, because we're at the harvest of souls. Literally, no pun intended, but true. And I told you I thought we had about roughly 5 years before we needed to be concerned about food famine. You felt we had less time than that. So if I heard you correctly, what is your estimation of how much time the average person has left before they need to be concerned about, shortages or famines at grocery stores?
Well, we're already in it. I mean, the price of butter has doubled. The price of beef has doubled. We saw eggs spike up from like $2 or $3 a dozen to $10. Now it came back down a bit, but we're in it. It's already happening. So I believe that we are on that curve of hyperinflation, and what that means is that food just becomes so expensive you can't afford it. I believe that we will be well into hyperinflation within 6 months. So you need to get started right away. And you can overlay where we are with the price of food with charts, say, from Weimar, Germany. Do we have a couple of years before the entire destruction of the country? Maybe. But in terms of food, we don't have that much time. The U.S. cattle herd now is less than it was in the 1950s. There's been so much different stuff going on with drought or flooding all over the world, global food, and then of course the lawfare against farmers. Food production is just way, way down globally. So you really need to get on this right away. And if you say, well, I've got a couple of years, next time you go to the grocery store, you take a look at that and you tell me if you've got a couple of years or not.
It's a good point. No, thank you for that. That's a really good point. And that's what they did with the eggs to suppress it because of the health benefits you alluded to earlier. That's what they were really doing. You're just trying to toy with us, right? But they're also, I think that's the best thing about the wealth transfer is the harvest of souls, the wealth, getting people's purposes like yours financed, right, to help those who cannot help themselves.
If I could give you an example, John.
Yeah, please.
The reason why I watch the price of eggs pretty closely, it's not that I ever buy those. in Weimar, Germany in 1922, in January, the price of a dozen eggs, people were grumbling because it was 3 marks, and it had doubled over the past couple of years, and people were really grumbling about it.
Mm.
By October of that year, so these people did not have smartphones, did not have the internet. I don't think even radio was a big deal back then. By October of that year, a dozen eggs cost 1 billion marks. So when you get into hyperinflation and currency collapse, it's like that bathtub curve. It kind of starts, it kind of starts, it kind of starts. And when you hit that inflection point, that turning point, if I might
Hmm.
borrow Kirk's analogy, it starts to go unbelievably fast. Like you can't keep
Yeah.
up with it fast.
It
So,
unwinds.
and at the beginning of this year, the price of eggs had more than tripled for sure. Now it did come back down, but it's still much, much higher. And we're just seeing it like I'm seeing it. I'm seeing empty restaurants have a lot of tables. A
Hmm.
lunch that I used to buy $10 now costs 20.
Yep.
I mean, it's happening. We're on that curve. So you need to get started on this right away. I've really done everything I can to help people get started as quickly as possible. So yeah, backyardfoodproduction.com.
No, I don't think you're being hyperbolic given your historical financial background, coupled with my own experiential living has certainly yielded that. And Weimar Germany, they, like you said, they were bringing wheelbarrows full of German, what was it?
Marks. Yeah.
Marks, yeah, marks to, wherever they were buying, I guess their equivalency of a grocery store back then. And so what, we might be looking at a dozen eggs costing what, 25, $50 maybe at some point?
That's coming. And then it's going to keep going up from there because,
Oh,
what we're looking at is the destruction of the US dollar. And we all
yeah.
know that that's well in the works. Will they be able to shift things over with the CB? I mean, I don't know why people think the CBDCs are going to, or the digital stable coin. A digital stable coin is just the same as a US dollar. It's, there's no
Well,
limit on it. There's infinite printing. It's just a digital version of the same stuff. So,
well, that's
uh,
why you want to invest in asset-backed things that are against that. And there are ways we talk about that all the time. But yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I
So,
appreciate you for bringing that up. People
no, it's
really have to
fine.
get into tangible precious metals, food,
Yep. Land,
medicines, weapons, land, water,
right.
community building.
Community. Yeah, yeah. Because again, most people are not going to have access to this. So we want to try to narrow that gap of attrition as much as possible. So there's more seats at the table, if you will. So
Yeah.
yeah, we will definitely get the link out for let me see if I had again, backyardfoodproduction.com. We'll put that link in the description, and also texasready.net for the seed.
TexasReady.net. Yeah, and if you mention Marjory Wildcraft or put the coupon code GROW,
Mhm.
they'll toss in a $25 nutrient pack for your plants, which is super useful. So yeah.
Yeah. Hey, before we go, Marjory, what I always do, customer with my guests, what last words do you have for the audience that you'd like to impart to them?
Well, no matter what happens, just always know that you're supported and loved. That God really does love you. And if you have a question, just like I don't know what I can do. I'm living in an apartment. I need to grow food or whatever. Just hold that question in your heart and just know that you'll be given an answer and be very, very open-minded. You never know where the answer is going to come from, but you will be given an answer. And everything that's going on here, there is an answer. Like during the whole COVID, I loved you called it convid.
Convid.
You know, if you paid attention, you could find ways to navigate that whole system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to say we're in the apocalypse, or pestilence, war, famine. There's always, with the famine, there's a way around it. There's always you're always given a way. Just
Yeah.
hold it in your heart, stay calm, stay true to who you are and your connection to the divine, and be open, and things will come to you.
Yeah, asking you shall receive, as the word says, and you did that, and you got out at the right time, and now you're in it at the right time. So, really appreciate having you here, Marjory Wildcraft. Uh, really, thank you so much for being here. Backyard Food Production. I know it's going to be of great benefit to many, many, many of our listeners, and you're bringing clarity and calm where it is needed most at this critical time. So, we thank you for being here, and we hope to have you on again in the near future.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
man. Take care.